I remember that night at Wembley Stadium, July 15th, 1988, clearer than almost any other night of my life. People think the loudest moments of a concert are what stay with you, but for me, it's always been the quiet ones. The human ones. We had 72,000 fans packed into that stadium, and when I stepped out into the lights, the roar felt like a physical force pressing into my chest. You never really get used to that sound, no matter how many shows you do. It's overwhelming, beautiful, humbling, frightening, all at once. I always tried to remind myself that behind every scream was a person, a story, a heart beating as fast as mine was. That night, one of those hearts reached me in a way I never expected. The show was running smoothly, the kind of night where every dance step feels like it lands perfectly, where the energy from the crowd lifts you up so high you feel like you're floating. We'd gone through Wanna Be Startin' Something, Human Nature, Bad. All those songs that made the world feel alive, and then we got to Billie Jean. That song always created this electricity that I could almost touch. The lights dimmed, the beat kicked in, and I stepped into the spotlight. I heard that wave of screams rise and fall like a living thing. I felt powerful, but also strangely vulnerable. Billie Jean always did that to me, put me right between who I was and who people imagined me to be. I was mid-move when I noticed something shifting at the bottom of the stage. Little movements like that are easy to miss, but when you've been performing long enough, you feel them instinctively. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw a girl, young, frightened, determined, slipping past security. I could hear one of the guards shouting behind the music, see hands grabbing at her and missing. She kept moving, almost stumbling, but still pushing forward, like she didn't have a choice. Like whatever drove her, there was stronger than fear. I've had people rush the stage before, and normally the guards would have taken her down in seconds, but something in the way she was moving, there was desperation, not aggression, and I felt it hit me right in the chest. She reached the edge of the stage just as two guards closed in. Instinct told me to keep performing, to stay in character, but something deeper inside me made me lift my hand. Just a small gesture, barely noticeable to most people. But the guards saw it, they hesitated, they stopped, and for a moment it felt like the whole world paused with them. The music kept playing, the beat kept pulsing, but inside me everything went still. She looked up at me, her face wet with tears, her whole body trembling. I'll never forget that look. It wasn't the look of a fan excited to touch her idol. It was pain, raw pain, the kind you feel even before someone says a word. When she stepped closer, her legs looked like they could barely hold her. I took a step toward her, not because it was dramatic or because the crowd would love it, but because I felt like if I didn't go to her, she might fall apart right there. When I reached her, she covered her face, sobbing so hard I could feel her shaking from inches away. I put my hand on her shoulder, gently, the same way I would touch one of my own brothers or sisters if they were hurting. Her whole body almost collapsed into me. I pulled her into a hug, and she held onto me like I was the only solid thing in the world. And maybe in that moment I was. I whispered to her, asking if she was all right, but she couldn't answer. The words were trapped behind her tears. Eventually she managed to speak, her voice tiny and broken. She told me about her father, how he had raised her alone, how they danced in their kitchen to my music, how he had died just 2 weeks before. She said she didn't know why she ran, only that she needed to feel something close to him again, something familiar, something that made her feel like she wasn't disappearing inside her grief. She said my music was the last thing that made her feel connected to him. Hearing that broke something open inside me. People think fame makes you untouchable, but it doesn't. I felt her pain like it was echoing inside my own chest. I kept one arm around her and brushed the hair away from her face with the other. The crowd near the stage had gone quiet, which almost never happens during Billie Jean. You could feel this strange kind of reverence spreading out from us, like everyone sensed how fragile the moment was. I took her hand and held it up gently so the audience could see she was safe, that she belonged there for that brief second. The stadium erupted, not with the frantic energy of a typical concert scream, but with warmth. A wave of love pouring over this girl who needed it more than she could ever say. I guided her to the edge of the stage, letting her stay as long as she needed. Before she stepped off, I touched my forehead to hers. It was something my mother used to do when I was sad, a way of saying, "I see you, and you're not alone." She closed her eyes like she felt it, really felt it. I kissed her forehead softly. She cried harder, but it was different now, lighter, freer. A release instead of a collapse. When the guard led her backstage, I watched her go for a second longer than I probably should have. I wanted to make sure she felt safe, that she knew she wasn't in trouble. Then I turned back to the center of the stage and fell right back into the choreography. But inside I felt changed, softened. For the rest of the show, I could still feel the echo of her trembling in my arms. After the concert, I asked security if she was all right. They told me she was sitting backstage, still emotional but safe, and they were treating her kindly. I felt relieved. You never know what someone is carrying inside when they run toward you like that. Sometimes it's obsession, sometimes it's confusion, but sometimes it's heartbreak trying to find a place to breathe. That night stayed with me for years. Not because it was dramatic, not because fans talked about it afterward, but because in a sea of 72 0 people, one young girl reminded me why I did all of this in the first place. People didn't just come to hear music. They came to feel understood, to feel seen, to find a moment that lifted them out of whatever darkness they were living with. I always hoped my music could be a light for people, even if just a small one. But that night, someone reached for that light in the most literal way, and I'm grateful I was there to meet her halfway. Sometimes I think about her, Sarah. I imagine she grew up, healed, built a life, carried that night with her the way I carried it with me. I hope she found joy again. I hope she dances sometimes, maybe even to Billie Jean, the way she used to with her father, and I hope that when she remembers that moment on stage, she remembers not the fear or the grief, but the feeling of being held, understood, and safe. Because that's what she gave me too. A reminder that behind every scream, every face in the crowd, there is a story. And every now and then, those stories step out of the darkness and into the light of the stage, letting you touch something real, something human, something unforgettable. And that night at Wembley, I'll never forget it, not as a performer, not as a superstar, but as a person, as Michael.